Introduction: the words that quietly shape your entire life. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a breath. Now, consider the sheer volume of language that passes through your consciousness every single day. From the instant you wake up and the first flicker of thought crosses your mind, often something as mundane as, "I'm tired," or "I need to get moving," to the final, drifting thoughts as you fall asleep, you are engaged in an unceasing, internal monologue. Add to that the thousands of words you speak aloud to partners, children, colleagues, and strangers, and the digital dialogue of texts, emails, and social media posts. We tend to think of words as mere vessels, simple containers we fill with meaning to describe the world around us. We assume that when we speak, we are reporting on reality. We believe that if we say, "I am stressed," we are simply observing an objective truth about our current state of being. But what if that assumption is fundamentally backwards? What if, instead of describing reality, our words are the primary architects of it? Every person walks through life carrying a vocabulary that acts as a blueprint for their destiny. The words you habitually choose do not just reflect your circumstances, they actively build the walls of your emotional house, define the boundaries of your potential, and determine the quality of your relationships. We live in an era where we obsess over external optimization. We track our steps, monitor our caloric intake, analyze our financial portfolios, and optimize our professional workflows. Yet, we remain strangely indifferent to the most powerful tool we possess, the linguistic code we use to interface with reality. We treat our words as disposable, tossing them out into the ether without realizing that every syllable carries a neurological and psychological weight. This book is an invitation to perform a radical audit of your internal and external language. Over the next 15 chapters, we are going to move beyond the superficial notion of positive thinking. Positive thinking, on its own, is often little more than a coat of paint on a crumbling foundation. True transformation requires something deeper. It requires a fundamental restructuring of the neuro-linguistic pathways that govern how you perceive yourself and your world. When you change your words, you are not merely changing the tone of your conversation, you are signaling to your brain to prioritize different information. You are shifting your nervous system from a state of contraction and defense to a state of expansion and possibility. You are reorienting your identity from that of a spectator to a creator. Throughout these pages, we will weave together the latest insights from neuroscience. Specifically how neuroplasticity allows us to rewire the brain through conscious linguistic choice, with the timeless wisdom of philosophy and the practical rigor of behavioral science. We will explore how language acts as a filter for your perception, deciding which opportunities you notice and which threats you fixate on. We will look at how your vocabulary can act as a catalyst for healing after trauma or as a chain that keeps you tethered to past failures. Consider, for instance, the difference between saying, "I have to do this," and "I get to do this." On the surface, the change is a single word. But psychologically, the shift is tectonic. The former phrase triggers a stress response, framing the task as a burden or an imposition upon your autonomy. The latter triggers a shift toward gratitude and purpose, framing the same task as a privilege. This is not a linguistic trick, it is a profound shift in your internal biology. Many of you have spent years feeling stuck. You feel as though your life is a script written by someone else, or perhaps a series of events over which you have no agency. You have tried the books, the courses, and the resolutions, only to find yourself back in the same emotional terrain. The reason is simple yet startling: you have been trying to change your external results while continuing to speak the language of your old self. You cannot build a new life with the vocabulary of your past. As we progress, we will systematically dismantle the vocabulary of limitation, those self-deprecating, fearful, and stagnant phrases that have become so habitual they feel like personality traits. We will replace them with a language of precision, clarity, and intentionality. We will explore how to speak to those we love in ways that invite connection rather than conflict, and how to command our own focus in ways that drive professional and personal excellence. This journey requires courage. It requires the willingness to catch yourself in the act of sabotaging your own potential with a single word. It requires the patience to retrain a tongue that has been running on autopilot for decades. But the reward is nothing short of a new life. You are a biological organism that is constantly interpreting data. Your words are the primary tool you use to interpret that data. By refining your language, you are refining your interpretation. By refining your interpretation, you are refining your emotions. By refining your emotions, you are fundamentally changing the person you are becoming. Welcome to Why Life Starts Changing When Your Words Change. You are about to discover that the most transformative tool in your possession has been sitting on the tip of your tongue all along. We are going to teach you how to use it with precision, with power, and with purpose. Are you ready to move beyond the words that have held you back and start speaking the language of your true, unlimited potential? If so, turn the page. Our exploration begins within the silent, unseen architecture of your own mind. Chapter Summary. Words as architects, language is not merely descriptive, it is the primary tool used to construct our internal and external reality. The overlooked power. While we optimize almost every other aspect of our lives, we often ignore the profound impact of our daily vocabulary. Beyond positive thinking, true change involves neuro-linguistic restructuring, not just superficial positive affirmations. The biological shift, choosing different words, changes your nervous system state, moving you from defense to possibility. Identity alignment. You cannot build a new life using the limiting vocabulary of your past self. The journey ahead. The book will guide you through practical, scientific, and philosophical exercises to reprogram your speech and reclaim agency. Chapter 1. The invisible conversation happening inside your mind. We tend to believe that our thoughts are private, untouchable, and largely inconsequential until we choose to act upon them. We treat our internal dialogue like a background radio station, something that plays continuously, which we can tune in or out at will, but which ultimately doesn't change the furniture in the room. However, psychological science and neurobiology suggest something far more significant. Your internal dialogue is the command center of your nervous system. It is not just commentating on your life, it is dictating the physiological and emotional environment in which you live. Consider the moment you experience a setback. Perhaps a project at work falls through, a deadline is missed, or a conversation with a loved one goes sideways. Almost instantaneously, a voice inside your head begins to narrate the event. It might say, "Of course this happened, you always mess up," or "This is typical, things never work out for you." This is not merely a thought, it is an act of linguistic reinforcement. By labeling the situation with words like always, never, or typical, you are cementing the event into a pattern. You are moving from a single experience to a generalized belief about your capabilities. This invisible conversation is the primary filter through which you perceive reality. Neuroscience offers us the concept of the reticular activating system, RAS, a bundle of nerves at the brainstem that filters the millions of bits of sensory data we encounter every second. The RAS is highly sensitive to the commands we give it through our language. When you repeat phrases like, "I am overwhelmed," or "I am incapable," your brain takes these as directives. It begins to scan your environment for evidence to support those labels. It will highlight every mistake you make, every sign of stress, and every obstacle in your path, while simultaneously filtering out evidence of your competence, your progress, or your potential. Your brain, in its attempt to be efficient, seeks to validate the internal language you use. Why do we do this? Evolutionarily, our brains are wired for survival, not necessarily for happiness. The negativity bias is a survival mechanism that prioritizes scanning for threats. In the modern world, where the threats are rarely predators but rather social or professional challenges, this bias manifests as a constant, critical inner monologue that looks for everything that could go wrong. Left unmanaged, this becomes the default setting for your mind. You begin to define yourself not by your strengths, but by the threats your mind is perpetually identifying. The tragedy of the average person is that they are entirely unaware of this internal narration. They believe their thoughts are objective truths handed down by the universe. They say, "I am a procrastinator," as if it were a diagnostic label written in stone, rather than a linguistic habit they have cultivated. By constantly using the word "I am," they are not just describing an action, they are defining an identity. When you say, "I am tired," you are claiming fatigue as an intrinsic state of your being. When you instead say, "I am experiencing a wave of fatigue," you create distance. You move from being the emotion to being the observer of the emotion. This subtle linguistic shift is the beginning of emotional mastery. It allows you to recognize that your current state is transient, not permanent. It allows you to reclaim your agency. To transform your life, you must become a vigilant observer of this invisible conversation. This does not mean you must suppress your thoughts. Suppression is, in fact, a form of internal violence that only gives thoughts more power. Instead, you must learn to interrupt the pattern. When you notice that critical voice surfacing, you must consciously intervene. You don't have to force a happy thought that feels like a lie, you only need to shift toward a more accurate, empowering, or neutral description. Replace "I am a failure" with "I have failed at this specific task," which provides me with data for improvement. The first statement is a cage, the second is a lesson. The first drains your energy. The second fuels your growth. Over time, these linguistic pivots begin to rewire the neural pathways in your brain. You are literally pruning the synaptic connections that support your old, limiting identity and forging new, robust pathways that align with the person you are choosing to become. The most successful people in the world, those who seem to navigate adversity with grace and seize opportunities with ease, do not have minds that are free of doubt. They simply have a different internal vocabulary. They have learned that if they talk to themselves as a mentor would, they gain the perspective of a mentor. If they talk to themselves as a victim would, they inherit the burdens of a victim. You have spent years mastering the art of the inner critic. You have become incredibly skilled at narrowing your world through language. Today, you are starting the process of reversing that trend. You are beginning to realize that the most important conversation you will ever have is the one you are having with yourself right now. It is time to treat that conversation with the same care, respect, and intention you would offer to someone you deeply admire. As you become more conscious of your internal dialogue, you will start to notice the moments where your words are keeping you small. In those moments, pause. Rephrase. Pivot. You are not just changing your words. You are upgrading your operating system. Chapter Summary. The command center, your internal dialogue, is not just a passive commentary, it actively shapes your physiological and emotional state. The RAS filter, your brain's reticular activating system, scans for evidence that supports the internal language you use, effectively making your words a self-fulfilling prophecy. The negativity bias. Humans are naturally wired to look for threats, but modern self-talk often applies this bias to our own self-worth and capabilities. Identity labels, words like "I am" carry massive psychological weight, they define your identity, so be careful what you attach to that phrase. Creating distance, you are not your thoughts or your current emotional state. Using linguistic distance, e.g., "I am experiencing," allows you to move from being a victim of your emotions to being an observer of them. Intentional intervention, you don't need to suppress thoughts, you need to notice them and consciously rephrase them to turn limitations into data for growth. Neurological rewiring, consistent practice of intentional language physically alters the brain's neural pathways, supporting a new. Chapter 2, Every word plants a seed. In the study of agriculture, we understand a simple, immutable law: you reap what you sow. If you plant the seeds of thorns, you cannot expect to harvest grapes. If you neglect the soil entirely, the ground will naturally produce weeds. We instinctively grasp this when it comes to our gardens, yet we fail to apply the same logic to the landscape of our own lives. We act as if our words are fleeting vibrations, dissipating into the air the moment they are spoken, leaving no trace behind. But this is a profound misunderstanding of the human experience. Every word you utter is a seed, and the subconscious mind is the most fertile soil imaginable. Think of your subconscious as a vast, non-judgmental garden. It does not care whether the seeds you plant will result in a beautiful harvest or a crop of brambles. It only cares about the quality of the seed and the consistency of the planting. When you repeatedly speak certain words over your life, or more importantly, over your identity, you are depositing those seeds into the deep, dark, rich soil of your inner self. Over time, these seeds germinate. They grow into beliefs, then into habits, and finally into the tangible circumstances of your existence. Consider the person who habitually tells themselves, "I'm just not the type of person who stays consistent. At first, this might seem like a casual observation, a harmless admission of a personal struggle. But by saying it repeatedly, they are planting a seed of identity. They are telling their subconscious, this is who I am. Once that seed takes root, the brain begins to work in harmony with that belief. It will notice every time the person skips a workout or misses a deadline, and it will interpret those actions as proof of their inherent inconsistency. Soon, the person is no longer trying to be consistent, they are living out the harvest of a seed they planted months or years ago. Conversely, imagine someone who, in the face of repeated failures, chooses to say, I am becoming more resilient with every challenge. This is a different seed entirely. It doesn't deny the reality of the difficulty, but it frames the experience as a process of growth. This seed is planted in the soil of potential. As the weeks pass, the subconscious begins to cultivate this belief. The person starts to approach obstacles not with dread, but with a quiet, observant curiosity. They begin to notice their own strength. They begin to act in ways that confirm their resilience. They are harvesting the fruit of a different kind of seed. We often wonder why our lives seem to follow the same cyclical patterns. Why do we end up in similar relationship dynamics, professional plateaus, or emotional traps year after year? It is because we are using the same vocabulary to cultivate our reality. We are surprised by the harvest, forgetting that we were the ones who sowed the seeds in the first place. If you do not like the fruit currently growing in your life, you cannot simply wish for a different harvest. You must stop planting the old seeds and begin planting new ones. The danger, of course, is that most of us are planting seeds unconsciously. We speak in reaction to our emotions. We react to traffic, to the news, to our partners, and to our own shortcomings with language that is reflexive rather than intentional. We are scattering seeds in the wind, and then wondering why the forest of our lives looks the way it does. To change your life, you must become a conscious gardener. You must inspect every word before it leaves your lips or settles in your heart. Ask yourself, is this word planting a seed of possibility, or a seed of limitation? If you hear yourself saying, I can't afford that, you have planted a seed of scarcity. If you instead say, how can I create the value necessary to acquire that, you have planted a seed of creativity. The difference in the harvest is life-altering. One leads to a dead end, the other leads to a path. This process is not about toxic positivity or denying your current circumstances. It is about taking responsibility for the seeds you are dropping into your future. You are the architect of your own inner environment. If you want to experience peace, start planting seeds of calmness, stability, and kindness in your speech. If you want to experience abundance, start planting seeds of value, opportunity, and gratitude. The harvest takes time. This is the part where most people give up. They plant a new, empowering word for a day or two, look at their life, and when they don't see an immediate, miraculous transformation, they conclude that words don't matter. But gardening is a game of patience and persistence. You must tend to the soil. You must keep watering the new seeds with repetition and keep pulling the weeds of old, limiting language. As you begin this practice, you will notice something fascinating. The old weeds will keep trying to grow. The old, limiting phrases will pop up in your mind out of habit. Do not be discouraged. This is simply the garden of your mind adjusting to a new way of being. Simply pull the weed and replace it with a better seed. With every intentional word, you are shifting the biology of your mind and the trajectory of your future. You are moving from a passive victim of your circumstances to the active creator of your destiny. Chapter Summary. The Law of the Harvest. Like a garden, your life is a reflection of the seeds, words, you plant in your subconscious mind. Subconscious receptivity. The subconscious does not distinguish between empowering and limiting seeds, it accepts whatever you plant consistently. Identity planting, repeatedly using self-limiting language, I am, creates a solidified identity that dictates your habits and future actions. Conscious gardening, most people sow seeds unconsciously through reflexive reactions. You must become a vigilant auditor of your internal and external speech. The power of framing, reframing language, such as changing, I can't, to, how can I? transforms your mental state from one of limitation to one of resourcefulness. The necessity of patience, transformation is not instantaneous. Consistent, patient, and repeated planting of intentional words is required to see in Chapter 3, Why Your Brain Believes What You Repeatedly Say. The human brain is often described as a supercomputer, but this analogy misses the most critical aspect of its function. The brain is essentially a prediction machine that thrives on efficiency. It does not want to exert unnecessary energy analyzing every situation from scratch. Instead, it looks for patterns, creates shortcuts, and relies on what it already knows to be true. This is where the profound power of repetition comes into play. When you say something to yourself, or allow yourself to hear the same narrative repeatedly, you are not just expressing a thought, you are physically etching that thought into your neural architecture. Neuroscience calls this phenomenon Hebbian learning, often summarized by the phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time you repeat a belief, you are strengthening the synaptic connections associated with that belief. If you consistently tell yourself that you are capable and prepared, you are physically thickening the neural pathways that support confidence. If you consistently tell yourself that you are prone to stress and agitation, you are reinforcing the pathways associated with anxiety. Your brain is a masterpiece of plasticity, constantly adapting to the stimuli it receives. The words you repeat are the most consistent stimulus you provide. Why does the brain hold so tightly to what we tell it? It comes down to cognitive consistency. The brain seeks to maintain a coherent narrative about who you are. If you tell yourself, I am a person who always finishes what I start, your brain becomes uncomfortable when you encounter a task you haven't completed. It creates a state of psychological tension that drives you to close the gap. It essentially says, that doesn't match the data I have on file, let's fix it. This is why language is not just a form of communication, it is a mechanism for identity regulation. Conversely, if your internal database is filled with entries like, I never get breaks, or, I am always the one left behind, your brain will treat these as baseline truths. When an opportunity for a break or a moment of success presents itself, the brain may actually ignore it, misinterpret it, or sabotage it to maintain the integrity of the existing narrative. It does not want to be wrong about who you are. This is why people often self-sabotage when they get close to a goal that contradicts their long-held self-narrative. Their brain is working hard to preserve the reality they have built through their own repeated words. Understanding this should be both humbling and incredibly empowering. If your current limitations are simply the result of well-worn neural pathways, then you have the power to change them. You are not stuck with a fixed personality or a set destiny, you are living with a set of habits that have been reinforced by your past language. By consciously interrupting those old, destructive loops and feeding your brain new, intentional commands, you begin the process of rewiring. This is why repetition is the secret language of transformation. A single positive thought is a fleeting spark, a mantra repeated with intention for weeks is a forging process. This is the science behind why affirmations, when used correctly, work. They are not magic spells, they are repetitive signals that force the brain to reevaluate its current truth. When you say, I am becoming more productive every day, and you actually follow through with small actions, you are providing the brain with undeniable data. You are forcing it to rewrite its records. You may be wondering how to bridge the gap between where you are and who you want to be when your brain is still wired for the old version of you. The key is to start with stretch language. You do not have to jump to a conclusion that feels like a lie. If you feel like a failure, stating, I am a total success, may feel like an internal contradiction that your brain rejects. Instead, use bridging language, I am becoming the type of person who finds solutions, or, I am learning to handle challenges with more grace. This language is believable, and because it is believable, your brain will accept it. As you accept these smaller shifts, you gain the momentum to reach for even more empowering truths. As you go about your day, pay attention to the background noise of your thoughts. Notice the repetitive phrases you lean on when life gets difficult. Are you telling yourself a story that keeps you in the same old, limited brain state? Or are you using your words to nudge your brain toward the future you are building? Your brain is listening. It is waiting for your instructions. It is ready to build the new pathways you ask for, but it requires consistency. It requires you to be the guardian of your own internal narrative. By repeating your new truths, you are giving your brain the permission, and the architectural blueprint, to transform. Chapter Summary. The prediction machine. Your brain is an efficiency-driven engine that relies on existing patterns to predict and navigate reality, making your current beliefs deeply entrenched. Hebbian learning. The principle, neurons that fire together, wire together, explains how repeated language physically reinforces neural pathways, making your thoughts a biological habit. Cognitive consistency. Your brain actively works to keep your actions in line with your self-narrative. If you define yourself as a failure, your brain will struggle to support success. Identity regulation. Language acts as the primary tool for maintaining your sense of self. To change your behavior, you must first change the linguistic labels you apply to your identity. The power of bridging. Instead of using positive language that feels like a lie, use stretch language that feels believable. This allows your brain to accept the upgrade without internal resistance. Neurological forging. Transformation isn't about one-time positive thinking, it's about the consistent repetition of new, intentional. Chapter 4. Breaking the vocabulary of limitation. We all carry a shadow vocabulary, a collection of words, phrases, and self-deprecating labels that we have collected over years of disappointments, societal conditioning, and protective pessimism. These words feel comfortable. They are the linguistic equivalent of a worn-out sweater that is fraying at the edges but feels familiar against the skin. We use them as armor. If we tell ourselves we are not good enough or that a project is too hard, we are preemptively lowering the stakes. By limiting our own potential in our language, we protect ourselves from the stinging disappointment of failing to reach a goal we were afraid to fully pursue. However, this armor is also a cage. The vocabulary of limitation is not a safety net, it is a structural barrier that keeps you exactly where you are. When you frequently use words like impossible, can't, should have, try, or I guess, you are systematically stripping yourself of your creative power. Each of these words carries a specific energetic and psychological signature that signals to your mind that the door is closed. Let us examine the word try. We often use it as a polite way to hedge our bets. I'll try to get that report done, or I'll try to be more patient. On the surface, it sounds responsible, but neuro-linguistically, try implies the possibility of failure. It is an escape clause. When you say you will try, your brain immediately starts calculating how to excuse the failure if it happens. Contrast this with the language of commitment, I will complete this report, or I am choosing to practice patience. The shift is absolute. One implies an attempt, the other implies a decision. When you eliminate try from your vocabulary, you remove the luxury of underperforming. Then there is the vocabulary of victimhood, words like always and never, when applied to your own shortcomings or the actions of others. I always mess things up, or people never appreciate what I do. These are the most destructive seeds you can plant. They imply that your current circumstances are a permanent, inescapable feature of your personality or your life. They ignore the nuance of human experience and delete your ability to adapt. When you say, always, you are telling your brain to look only for the instances that confirm your deficiency and to ignore every time you have succeeded or been supported. You are literally blinding yourself to your own progress. Perhaps the most insidious part of this vocabulary is the should. The word should is a parasite. It is almost always rooted in the expectations of someone else. Society, family, or a distorted image of an ideal life. I should be further ahead by now, or I should be happier with what I have. This language creates a constant state of internal friction. It pulls you away from the present moment and keeps you tethered to a guilt-ridden comparison with a standard that may not even align with your true values. When you use should, you aren't leading your life, you are being managed by an invisible, demanding authority. Breaking this vocabulary requires a process of linguistic detoxification. You cannot simply stop using these words, you must replace them with a language of agency. This is where you reclaim your narrative. When you find yourself defaulting to, I can't, pivot to, I am finding a way to. When you hear yourself saying, I should, replace it with, I am choosing to, or, I am exploring why I want to. This transition will feel awkward at first. You might find yourself pausing mid-sentence to rephrase. You might feel a sense of internal resistance, as if your old vocabulary is fighting for its life. This is perfectly normal. You are dismantling an identity that has served a protective purpose for a long time. Start by choosing one limitation word per week to excerpt from your speech. If it is the word hard, replace it with challenging or an opportunity to grow. If it is stressed, replace it with energized or focused on a solution. Notice how your body reacts when you make these shifts. Notice the clarity that arises when you stop using vague, limiting descriptors. This is not about pretending that life is effortless. It is about refusing to describe your life as a series of obstacles. When you change your vocabulary, you change your posture toward the world. You move from a defensive crouch to a ready, capable stance. You stop describing your limitations and start describing your potential. As you strip away the vocabulary of doubt, you create the empty space required for a new, more expansive version of yourself to emerge. The cage is made of words, all you have to do to open the door is change how you speak. Chapter Summary. The shadow vocabulary. We often use limiting language as a form of psychological armor to protect us from the fear of disappointment. The problem with try. The word try creates an escape clause for failure, replacing it with commitment-based language creates a firm foundation for action. The trap of absolutes, always, and never, are tools of victimhood that cement negative patterns and blind you to evidence of your own growth and success. The parasite of should, the word should, creates guilt and external pressure, pulling you away from your authentic desires and the present moment. Linguistic detoxification. You must consciously identify and remove limiting words, replacing them with language that denotes agency, choice, and possibility. The resistance phase. Changing your vocabulary will feel strange or difficult initially. This is a normal part of shedding an old identity. Creating space. By clearing out the vocabulary of limitation, you make room for a more powerful and intentional self to occupy. Chapter 5. Speaking like the person you want to become. There is a fundamental misunderstanding in how most of us approach personal growth. We often operate under the assumption that we must become a new person before we can start speaking like one. We wait for the promotion, the weight loss, the successful business launch, or the emotional healing, thinking that once those milestones are reached, our confidence will naturally follow, and our speech will inevitably shift. But the science of identity tells us this is backward. You do not wait to become the person you want to be, you speak into existence the person you are becoming. Language is the primary mechanism through which we construct our identity. Your identity is not a static object sitting inside you, it is a dynamic process, a continuous, real-time performance that you enact through your words and thoughts. When you speak as if you are already the person who possesses the traits you desire, you are not lying to yourself, you are engaging in a process of identity alignment. You are signaling to your brain, your nervous system, and your social circle that your baseline has shifted. Consider the person who desires to be a leader. A leader does not talk about their confusion, they talk about their clarity. They do not dwell on the obstacles, they focus on the objectives. If you are struggling with self-doubt but are working toward a goal of professional influence, you must begin to curate your speech to match that vision. This does not mean you must ignore your current realities. It means you stop identifying with the problems of your current level and start identifying with the solutions of your future level. When you begin to speak like the person you want to become, you create a cognitive dissonance that the brain finds uncomfortable. Your brain wants your words and your reality to match. When you say, "I am the type of person who handles pressure with calm," and you find yourself in a stressful situation, your brain will struggle to reconcile that statement with your usual anxious reaction. It will push you, with incredible force, to change your behavior to match your words. It is this very discomfort that drives transformation. By setting the bar with your language, you force your actions to rise to meet it. To do this effectively, start by auditing the language you use when describing yourself to others. How do you introduce yourself? How do you answer the question, "How are you?" If you consistently reply with, "I'm swamped, I'm just hanging in there," or "I'm so tired," you are reinforcing a narrative of struggle. What would happen if you began to experiment with language that aligns with your ideal self? If you want to be more productive, try saying, I am focused on prioritizing what matters today. If you want to be more peaceful, try saying, I am intentionally creating space for stillness. This practice of identity language also extends to how you discuss your future. Most people talk about their goals in the future tense: I hope to, I want to, I would like to. This places your desires in a perpetually unreachable future. It keeps them as dreams rather than facts. Start shifting your language to the present tense, or the language of active becoming. Instead of, I hope to get fit, try, I am currently cultivating the habits of a healthy person. Instead of, I want to be more confident, try, I am learning how to trust my voice in new situations. This isn't about arrogance, it's about alignment. It is about taking ownership of the trajectory of your life. When you speak with the conviction of your future self, you change the way others perceive you, which in turn creates a feedback loop that reinforces your new identity. People will begin to treat you with the respect and expectation associated with the person you are speaking into existence. They will look at you and see the confidence you are verbalizing, which makes it easier for you to maintain that confidence in their presence. As you practice this, you will notice that the old version of you, the version that feels insecure, limited, or afraid, will still try to speak. You will catch yourself falling back into old patterns. That is okay. The transition from who you were to who you are becoming is not a single leap, it is a series of pivots. Every time you consciously choose to speak from the perspective of your desired self, you are layering another brick into the foundation of your new reality. Ask yourself today: if I were already the person I aspire to be, how would I describe my day? How would I talk about my challenges? How would I speak to my friends? Start using that vocabulary now. You are not waiting for permission or for the right moment. You are constructing yourself, word by word, breath by breath, conversation by conversation. The version of you that exists in your imagination is already waiting for you to catch up, and the only bridge to that version is the way you talk about your life today. Chapter Summary. Identity alignment. Identity is a dynamic process constructed through language. You must speak like the person you want to become before you reach your goals. The power of cognitive dissonance. When your words express a higher version of yourself, your brain feels a tension to align your actions with those words, accelerating personal change. Moving beyond future tense, avoid placing your goals in an unreachable future. Use present tense or active becoming language to ground your intentions in reality. Auditing self-introduction. The way you describe yourself and your state of being to others reinforces your current limitations. Change these replies to reflect your desired character. The social feedback loop. As you speak with more intentionality and confidence, others will begin to treat you differently, creating an environment that supports your new identity. Pivoting, not leaping. Transformation involves constant, small corrections. Don't worry about old patterns resurfacing, just pivot back to your intentional. Chapter 6. The emotional power hidden inside words. Emotions are often treated as invisible weather patterns, things that happen to us, which we must endure until they pass. We say things like, I am angry, I am sad, or I am feeling overwhelmed, as if these states were objective, external forces that have descended upon us. However, there is a profound connection between the words we select and the emotional state we inhabit. We do not just describe our feelings with words. We literally create, sustain, or dismantle those feelings through the linguistic labels we choose. Psychological science has identified a process known as emotional granularity, the ability to precisely identify and label one's internal state. When you possess low emotional granularity, you have a limited vocabulary, so you dump every uncomfortable feeling into a bucket labeled stressed or mad. But stress is a broad, vague term. It tells your brain very little about how to respond. Are you stressed because you are frustrated with a specific task? Are you stressed because you feel undervalued? Are you stressed because you are tired? By using imprecise language, you keep your nervous system in a state of high alert, generalized tension. When you develop high emotional granularity, you begin to use a much more nuanced vocabulary. Instead of saying, I am stressed, you might realize, I am feeling challenged, or I am feeling uneasy, or I am feeling a sense of urgency. This shift is not just semantic, it is physiological. By identifying the exact nuance of the emotion, you move the activity from the reactive, primal centers of the brain, the amygdala, into the executive, logical centers, the prefrontal cortex. You are effectively cooling down the emotional fire by giving it a specific name. Think of your words as the volume control for your nervous system. If you use inflammatory, hyperbolic language to describe your situation, you are turning the volume of your emotional response all the way up. When you tell a friend, "This is an absolute nightmare," or "I am completely devastated," you are not just venting, you are signaling to your body to release a flood of stress hormones. Your body responds to your language as if the threat were literal. On the other hand, if you describe the same situation by saying, "This is a difficult moment that requires my attention," you are turning the volume down. You are signaling to your body that, while the situation is serious, you are in control. Language also dictates our capacity for resilience. We often mistake resilience for the absence of pain, but true resilience is the ability to maintain clarity in the midst of it. If you use language that labels every setback as a catastrophe, you will inevitably feel defeated. If you use language that frames every setback as feedback, you remain curious, stable, and ready to learn. This is why the most emotionally intelligent people are so careful with the adjectives they use to describe their day. They avoid absolute, permanent language. They don't say, "My life is ruined," they say, "I am currently navigating a complex challenge." This mastery over emotional language is also critical for healing. After a period of trauma or intense hardship, we often fall into the trap of telling our story as a tragedy, where we are the passive recipient of pain. While your pain is valid, describing yourself solely as the victim of your history keeps the wound open. When you begin to rewrite your narrative, not by lying about the facts, but by changing the adjectives you use to describe your role in that story, you begin to shift from being a victim to being a survivor. You move from, "I was broken by that experience," to, "I was forged by that experience." The facts remain the same, but the emotional trajectory of your future changes entirely. How can you apply this today? Start by building an emotional vocabulary. When you feel a surge of emotion, pause for a moment before you label it. Don't go for the easiest, most dramatic word. Ask yourself, is there a more accurate, less charged word for this? You might find that what you called anger is actually disappointment. You might find that what you called fear is actually excitement about a new challenge. The physical sensation of excitement and fear is nearly identical, it is your language that decides which one you experience. By refining your emotional vocabulary, you stop being a passenger to your feelings. You become the pilot of your own internal climate. You no longer react to your emotions. You observe them, name them, and choose your response. This is the foundation of lasting inner peace, not a life without difficult emotions, but a life where you are the master of the language that defines them. As you practice this, you will notice that your highs become more balanced, your lows become less volatile, and you develop a core of stability that no external event can easily shake. Chapter Summary. Emotional Granularity. Moving beyond vague labels like stressed or mad toward precise identification of your emotions allows your brain to process feelings logically rather than reactively. The prefrontal pivot, naming an emotion specifically, moves the brain's processing from the reactive amygdala to the executive prefrontal cortex, helping to dissipate intensity. Volume control, using hyperbolic language, e.g., nightmare, devastated, triggers a physical stress response. Using neutral, precise language keeps your nervous system calm and responsive. Resilience through framing. Resilience is not the absence of pain, but the ability to frame pain as feedback or a challenge rather than a catastrophe or permanent state. Rewriting your narrative, you can heal by changing the language you use to tell your story, shifting from the language of a victim to the language of a survivor. Refining your vocabulary. Practice pausing before labeling emotions to find more accurate, less charged words. You are the Chapter 7, Changing Conversations, Changing Relationships. We often operate under the illusion that communication is about the exchange of information. We think that if we speak clearly, provide the right facts, or articulate our needs, the other person will understand us perfectly. Yet, how often do we leave a conversation feeling more misunderstood, frustrated, or disconnected than when we started. This happens because communication is not merely an exchange of information. It is an exchange of emotional energy. The words you choose do not just convey a message, they set the temperature for the entire interaction. In every relationship, whether it is with a spouse, a child, a friend, or a colleague, there is a baseline, linguistic culture. This culture is built on the habitual phrases, tones, and patterns of speech that you and the other person have unconsciously adopted over time. If that culture is built on criticism, defensiveness, or passive aggression, the relationship will inevitably stagnate or fracture. If it is built on curiosity, validation, and clarity, the relationship will flourish. The good news is that you do not need the other person to change their vocabulary in order for the dynamic to shift. You can unilaterally alter the trajectory of any relationship by changing how you show up linguistically. The most common destroyer of connection is the use of you statements during conflict. When we are upset, our instinct is to point out, "You never listen to me, you are always late, you make me so angry." These phrases act like psychological daggers. They force the other person into an immediate state of defense. The moment someone feels attacked, their brain shuts down its capacity for empathy and pivots to survival mode. They stop hearing your message and start preparing their counterattack. To transform your relationships, you must master the art of the I statement, combined with objective observation. Instead of saying, "You are being disrespectful," try saying, "I feel undervalued when our plans are changed at the last minute without notice." Notice the difference. You are not attacking their character, you are expressing your internal experience. By removing the accusation, you lower their defenses. You invite them into a conversation rather than a confrontation. Another crucial element in relationship dynamics is the power of validation language. Most people listen only to respond, not to understand. They wait for their turn to speak, filtering the other person's words through their own biases. When you truly listen, you look for the emotional truth beneath the words. You can practice this by using reflective language. "What I hear you saying is that you feel overwhelmed by the workload, is that right?" Or, "It sounds like you really value quality time, and you felt disappointed when I missed dinner." This simple act of reflecting back what you heard makes the other person feel seen. And when people feel seen, they become infinitely more collaborative. In parenting and leadership, the language of empowerment versus the language of control changes everything. If you speak to your children or your team using the language of control, "Do this because I said so, you must, stop that," you breed resentment and dependency. If you use the language of empowerment, "What is your plan for completing this? How can we solve this together? I trust your judgment on this," you foster responsibility and autonomy. You are not just directing behavior, you are shaping their self-image. One of the most transformative shifts you can make in your daily conversations is the transition from "but" to "and." The word "but" is a linguistic eraser. It invalidates everything that came before it. If you say, "I really appreciate your effort, but we need to do better," the other person only registers the criticism. If you swap it for "and," the sentence becomes additive, "I really appreciate your effort, and I believe we can make it even stronger." And bridges two ideas, allowing for constructive feedback without destroying the connection. This applies deeply to the digital spaces where we spend so much of our time. Text messages, emails, and social media comments are stripped of tone, body language, and eye contact. Because of this, they are naturally prone to being misread as colder or more aggressive than intended. In writing, you must be hyper-intentional. Use more words of appreciation than you think you need. Soften your requests. Acknowledge the humanity of the person on the other side of the screen. Ultimately, changing your conversations requires a shift in your intention. Before you open your mouth or type a message, ask yourself, "Is my goal to be right, or is my goal to build a bridge?" If your goal is to be right, you will use weapons. If your goal is to build a bridge, you will use tools. Every conversation is a choice between creating connection or creating distance. When you choose to speak with grace, precision, and empathy, you will find that the people around you naturally begin to mirror that behavior. You set the standard for how you want to be treated, and you give others the safety they need to drop their guard. Chapter Summary. Energy exchange, communication is not just about facts, it is an exchange of emotional energy. Your words set the temperature of the interaction. The danger of you statements. Accusatory language triggers defensiveness, shutting down empathy. Shift to I statements to express your experience without attacking others. Reflective listening, use language that validates and mirrors what the other person is saying. What I hear you saying is, to make them feel truly seen and understood. Empowerment versus control, in leadership and parenting, move away from controlling language, you must, toward empowering language. How can we solve this? To build autonomy. The power of and replace the word but, which acts as a linguistic eraser, with and to combine appreciation with feedback effectively. Digital intention, in text-based communication, be hyper-intentional with warmth and clarity to compensate for the lack of tone and body language. Bridge versus weapon, every conversation is a choice. Ask yourself if your intent is to be right or to build a bridge. Chapter 8, Words that Create Opportunity. In the professional realm, we are taught to focus on strategy, networking, and technical skill. We optimize our resumes, polish our pitch decks, and obsess over market trends. Yet, there is a subtle, invisible force that often determines the difference between those who reach the highest levels of success and those who remain stuck on a plateau, the language of influence. Opportunity is not just something you find. It is something you create through the precision and energy of your communication. Many people subconsciously sabotage their professional potential through diminishing language. This includes phrases that erode your authority before you even finish your sentence. We add qualifiers like, I think, maybe, just, or, I'm not an expert, but, to soften our impact because we fear being seen as arrogant. While humility is a virtue, there is a vital distinction between arrogance and certainty. Confidence is the ability to state your ideas with clarity and ownership. When you use diminishing language, you are not being humble, you are being ineffective. You are handing the listener permission to ignore your input. Consider the difference in how two people might pitch a new project. One says, I was kind of thinking that maybe we could try this, if that's okay. The other says, I have analyzed our current bottleneck and identified a solution that will improve efficiency by 15%. Here is how we can implement it. The second person is not being aggressive, they are simply being precise. They are using the language of ownership. When you take ownership of your ideas, you invite others to trust you. Opportunity follows trust, and trust follows clarity. This language of ownership is equally powerful in business growth and negotiation. We often fall into the trap of scarcity language, viewing every negotiation as a battle for a fixed pie. We use words like cost, sacrifice, and concession. If you reframe these concepts into the language of value, you change the game entirely. Instead of discussing the cost of your services, discuss the value creation of your partnership. Instead of conceding a point, describe the adjustments you are making to reach a mutually beneficial outcome. By shifting your vocabulary, you shift the energy of the room from competition to collaboration. Wealth and influence are rarely attracted to people who describe their circumstances as insurmountable. If you talk about your industry as saturated, your career as stagnant, or your goals as a long shot, you are literalizing your limitations. You are broadcasting to your network that you see no path forward. To attract opportunity, you must cultivate the language of possibility. This means speaking about your goals as if they are inevitable outcomes of your effort. It means describing problems as challenges that require innovation and describing your vision with specific, actionable descriptors. Furthermore, consider the power of catalytic questioning in your professional interactions. Instead of asking closed-ended questions that lead to dead ends, like, can we do this? Ask questions that open the horizon. Use phrases like, what would it take to make this possible, or how might we leverage this opportunity to achieve X? This language forces the brain, both yours and the listener's, to stop looking for reasons why things won't work and start designing ways they can. You move from being a passenger in your career to being the lead engineer. The language you use on social media and in your professional writing also shapes your personal brand. If you use generic, passive, or overly cautious language, your brand will remain invisible. To build influence, your communication must be distinct and conviction-driven. You must be willing to use value-laden language that reflects your expertise. If you are a consultant, don't just say you help people, describe how you architect transformation. If you are a marketer, don't just say you write content, describe how you build digital ecosystems of influence. The words you choose serve as a mirror for your self-valuation. As you navigate your career, start listening to how the people you admire speak. You will notice they rarely use filler, they rarely apologize for their presence, and they are incredibly intentional with their vocabulary. They understand that their words are the primary currency of their business. Every email you write, every meeting you attend, and every conversation you have is an opportunity to practice this new standard of communication. Stop treating your words as mere noise. Start treating them as assets. When you speak with the conviction, clarity, and precision of someone who creates opportunity, the world around you will begin to shift. You will stop waiting for doors to open and start realizing that you have been holding the keys all along. Chapter Summary. The language of influence. Success is driven not just by technical skill, but by the precision and energy of your communication. Eliminating diminishing language, qualifiers like just, maybe, and I think erode your authority. Replace them with clear, ownership-based statements. Reframing to value. Shift from scarcity language, cost, concession, to value creation language, investment, partnership, to change negotiations from competition to collaboration. The language of possibility. Describe your goals as inevitable outcomes and your challenges as innovation drivers to signal growth to your network. Catalytic questioning. Use open-ended, proactive questions to force creative problem-solving and steer meetings toward results. Branding through vocabulary. Your professional brand is built on distinct, conviction-driven language that reflects your actual expertise and self-worth. Words as assets. View every communication as a business asset, invest in your language, and you will see the return in increased influence and opportunity. Chapter 9. Silencing the Inner Critic. We have all experienced that relentless, murmuring voice in the back of our minds, the one that surfaces the moment we decide to take a risk, speak up, or try something new. It is the voice that says, "Who do you think you are?" or "You're going to look foolish." We call it the inner critic, and for many, it feels like an immutable part of the human condition. We treat it as a permanent roommate, one we have to live with even if we despise its company. But the truth is, the inner critic is not a part of your soul, it is a conditioned response, a faulty psychological program that was likely installed in your early years to keep you safe from judgment and failure. The problem with the inner critic is that it is a master of camouflage. It often disguises its attacks as wisdom or realism. It tells you, "I'm not being mean, I'm just being practical," or "I'm just trying to keep you from getting your hopes up." By framing its insults as protective advice, it gains legitimacy. It convinces you that listening to it is an act of caution, rather than an act of sabotage. To silence the inner critic, you must first stop identifying with it. When the voice says, "You're going to fail," stop responding to the message and start observing the source. Instead of saying, "I am going to fail," rephrase it to, "I am hearing a thought that is afraid of failure." This tiny adjustment creates a massive shift in perspective. You have moved from being the victim of the criticism to the observer of the critic. You are now the one holding the spotlight, and when you shine the light on that voice, you will see it for what it truly is, a scared, outdated mechanism that is completely out of its depth in your current life. The most effective way to neutralize the critic is to replace its monologue with a mentor dialogue. The critic is reactive, fearful, and obsessed with the past. A mentor, however, is proactive, compassionate, and focused on the potential of the future. When your mind offers you a self-defeating thought, don't just try to ignore it. Respond to it with the perspective of a wise, supportive coach. If the critic says, "You're not ready for this opportunity," instead of accepting the thought, interject, "I am prepared for the growth this opportunity will require. I have the skills to learn what I don't yet know, and I am committed to the process." By talking back to your mind, you are not just silencing a voice, you are retraining your neural pathways to prioritize confidence over fear. You are actively choosing to overwrite the old programming with new, empowered data. It is crucial to recognize that the inner critic is not motivated by truth, it is motivated by comfort. It fears change because change is unknown, and the unknown is, to a primitive brain, a threat. Therefore, whenever you hear the critic getting loud, you can actually interpret it as a sign that you are moving in the right direction. It means you are stepping outside of your comfort zone. If the voice is silent, it usually means you are playing it safe and staying small. A noisy critic is often a byproduct of massive growth. You can also use humor as a tool to shrink the critic. Because the critic takes itself so seriously, it cannot survive being laughed at. If the voice says, "Everyone will think you're a fraud," imagine that voice coming from a tiny, cartoonish character in the corner of your room, wearing a ridiculous costume. By visualizing the critic as a harmless, buffoonish version of itself, you take away its power. It is no longer an authoritative internal judge, it is just background noise from a nervous system that hasn't caught up to your ambition. Finally, remember that you do not need to be perfectly confident to succeed. You only need to be willing to act in the presence of doubt. The goal is not to have a mind that never criticizes, the goal is to have a mind that you lead. You are the architect of your own internal landscape. If your roommate is constantly spewing negativity, you have the right, and the responsibility, to ask them to leave or, at the very least, to refuse to listen to their opinions. Start today. Every time you hear that voice, pause, acknowledge it, and then explicitly, out loud if you must, state the truth of your capability. I hear you, fear. I know you're trying to keep me safe, but I am choosing to move forward anyway. In this way, you turn the critic into a harmless indicator of your progress. You are no longer silencing yourself, you are simply refusing to let an outdated survival instinct call the shots in your future. Chapter Summary. The Mask of Realism. The inner critic often disguises itself as wisdom or cautious realism to gain your trust and keep you stuck in your comfort zone. Creating distance, stop identifying with the critic by labeling its attacks as thoughts or fears rather than objective truths about your worth. The mentor dialogue, actively replace the critic's monologue with a supportive, coaching perspective, talk back to your mind with evidence of your competence and willingness to learn. Growth indicator. A loud critic is often a sign of progress, it triggers fear because you are moving toward change, which the brain perceives as a threat. Humor as a weapon, the critic relies on being taken seriously, using visualization or humor to shrink the voice takes away its authority. Action amidst doubt, you don't need a silent mind to move forward, you only need to be willing to act even when the doubt is present. Taking charge, you are the architect of your internal landscape. You have the power to stop listening to out. Chapter 10, The Language of Gratitude, Hope, and Possibility. We often mistake gratitude for a passive reaction, something we do after something good happens to us. We wait for the promotion, the clear medical report, or the surprise gift before we express our thanks. But the most transformative power of gratitude lies in using it as a proactive linguistic tool. When you use the language of gratitude, hope, and possibility, you are not reacting to your reality. You are actively reshaping your perception of it. You are literally reconfiguring how your brain processes the world, moving from a state of deficiency to a state of discovery. The neurobiology of gratitude is staggering. When you focus your language on what you appreciate, you stimulate the release of dopamine and serotonin, the neurotransmitters that regulate mood, focus, and motivation. But beyond the chemical rush, there is a cognitive shift, the reticular activating system, RAS, which we discussed earlier, begins to filter the environment for more of what you are verbalizing. If your daily language is filled with appreciation for the small things, the stability of your home, the intelligence of your children, the opportunity to learn a new skill, your brain begins to treat these as the new baseline for your reality. You become a magnet for opportunity because your brain has been trained to notice it. The language of hope is equally vital, yet it is frequently misunderstood. Hope is not wishful thinking, which implies a passive waiting for a better outcome. Hope is a deliberate, active stance, it is the language of belief in your own capacity to navigate the future. When you speak about your goals using the language of hope, you are choosing to frame the unknown not as a source of fear, but as a field of potential. You are stating that, regardless of the challenges you encounter, you have the resilience and the wit to handle them. Consider the difference in these two internal narratives: I hope this works out, but I'm worried it won't, versus, I am excited to see how this unfolds, and I am prepared to adapt as I go. The first is the language of anxiety, the second is the language of hope. The second version acknowledges that the outcome is not guaranteed, but it places your own agency at the center of the experience. It turns hope from a fragile desire into a powerful, steady confidence. Then there is the language of possibility, the most expansive vocabulary of all. This is the language that questions the boundaries of what you think you can achieve. People who consistently use the language of possibility don't ask, "Can I do this?" They ask, "What needs to change for me to be able to do this?" They don't look at a closed door and say, "That's not for me," they look at it and say, "How do I need to prepare to walk through that door?" When you consistently use phrases like, "I wonder how I could," "What if," and "Imagine the potential of," you are engaging the creative centers of your brain. You are moving away from the survival-based logic of, "Is this safe?" to the creative logic of, "Is this growth-oriented?" This shift is profound. It allows you to break out of the rigid mental frameworks that have kept you stuck in the same career, the same relationship patterns, and the same emotional limitations for years. The most challenging aspect of this practice is maintaining it during dry seasons, those times when life feels difficult, stagnant, or uninspired. It is easy to be grateful when the sun is shining, but the language of gratitude is most powerful when it is used in the shadows. When you are going through a difficult season, you don't have to lie and pretend everything is perfect. Instead, use the language of gratitude to identify the hidden benefits. Even in the middle of a struggle, you can say, "I am grateful for the resilience I am building right now," or "I am grateful for the clarity this experience is bringing me." This is not positive thinking as a distraction, it is positive framing as a strategy. It is the tactical use of language to maintain your mental and emotional altitude so that you can see your way out of the tunnel. By choosing your words intentionally, you prevent your environment from dictating your internal state. You maintain control, you maintain motivation, and you keep your focus on the solutions rather than the symptoms of your struggle. As you integrate these linguistic habits, notice how your daily experience shifts. You will start to feel a sense of lightness and agency that was previously missing. You will find that opportunities appear where you once saw only obstacles. You will notice that your relationships become warmer because you are vocalizing appreciation rather than expectation. You are not just changing your words, you are upgrading the entire operating system of your life. You are moving from a life of default, where things happen to you, to a life of design, where you actively participate in the creation of your own joy, hope, and success. Chapter Summary. Gratitude as a strategy. Gratitude is not a passive reaction to good fortune, it is a proactive linguistic tool used to train your brain to notice opportunity. Neurochemical and cognitive benefits. Consistent gratitude shifts your neurochemistry, dopamine/serotonin, and retunes your RAS to scan for abundance rather than deficiency. Hope as active agency. True hope is the language of belief in your capacity to adapt and overcome, rather than passive wishful thinking. The language of possibility. Replace dead-end questions like, "Can I?" with growth-oriented questions like, "What needs to change for me to engage your brain's creative centers." Navigating dry seasons. Using gratitude during difficult times is not about ignoring reality. It is a tactical choice to frame experiences as sources of resilience and clarity. From default to design, by shifting your language to gratitude, hope, and possibility, you move from being a passenger in your own life to being the active. Chapter 11, Daily Habits that Reprogram Your Speech. You now understand that your words are not mere reflections of your current state, they are the architectural plans for your future. But knowing this and doing this are two different realities. The brain, as we have established, is an efficiency-driven machine. It loves the path of least resistance, which means it will naturally revert to the old, comfortable linguistic habits. The criticisms, the shoulds, and the limiting, "I can't" statements, whenever you aren't paying attention. To truly change your life, you must move beyond the conceptual and into the practical. You need a system. Transformation is not an event, it is a series of daily, intentional choices. To reprogram your speech, you must build linguistic rituals that force you to stop, observe, and consciously choose your language. Think of these habits as the software updates for your brain. By repeating them consistently, you gradually replace the outdated, restrictive code of your past with a new, empowered program for your future. The first habit is the morning linguistic setup. Before you engage with the world, before you check your emails, scroll through social media, or talk to anyone, take 2 minutes to set the tone for your internal monologue. Don't just list things you are grateful for, describe the person you are choosing to be today. Say it aloud. Today, I am choosing to be a person who approaches challenges with curiosity, or I am stepping into my day with clarity and purpose. By vocalizing your intention, you prime your brain to look for evidence that supports that identity throughout the day. You are setting the search parameters for your RAS before the noise of the day begins. The second habit is the pause and pivot method. This is your primary defense against unconscious speech. Throughout the day, you will inevitably catch yourself using a word or phrase that doesn't serve you. Perhaps you hear yourself say, "This is too hard." The moment you hear that thought, pause. You don't have to beat yourself up for the mistake, just pause, take a deep breath, and rephrase it aloud or in your mind, "This is a significant challenge, and I am finding the solution." By physically pausing, you break the neural circuit of the old habit. By replacing the words, you reinforce the new one. This pause is the moment where your power lives. The third habit is evening linguistic audit. Most of us end our days by reviewing our failures or the things that didn't go right. This is a recipe for a stressed nervous system and a reinforcing of a lack identity. Instead, spend 5 minutes before you go to sleep performing a brief audit of your day. Ask yourself 2 questions. Where did I choose language that empowered me today? And where did I fall back into old patterns, and how can I phrase that differently tomorrow? This reflection does not need to be a long, drawn-out process. It is a simple recalibration. It teaches your brain to value your own linguistic choices and keeps you conscious of your progress. Another powerful practice is the mirror check. Whenever you pass a mirror or see your reflection, use it as a trigger for a positive statement of identity. It doesn't have to be complex. It can be as simple as, "I am becoming stronger," or "I am capable of handling this." The key here is the trigger. By linking your reflection to a specific, empowering phrase, you create a mental anchor. Every time you see yourself, you are reminded of the version of you that you are constructing. Over weeks and months, this creates a profound psychological link between your self-image and your internal narrative. You might also consider the habit of linguistic environmental design. Your environment, the people you talk to, the media you consume, the podcasts you listen to, constantly feeds your vocabulary. If you surround yourself with language that is cynical, gossipy, or limiting, your own speech will naturally mirror it. Be intentional about the linguistic diet you consume. When you realize that a particular conversation or media source leaves you feeling drained or prone to negative self-talk, limit your exposure to it. Surround yourself with conversations that challenge you, uplift you, and model the type of speech you want to embody. These habits are not meant to make you perfect. Perfection is not the goal, consistency is. You will have days where you forget, days where you are tired, and days where you fall back into every old habit you have tried to leave behind. That is part of the process. The point is not to avoid falling, the point is to catch yourself and get back on track. As you make these rituals a permanent part of your day, you will notice that the conscious choice of language starts to become your new autopilot. You will find yourself speaking with clarity, kindness, and purpose without even having to try. That is the moment your transformation becomes permanent. Chapter Summary. Systems over concepts. Knowledge of linguistic power is useless without a system for implementation. You must build daily habits to override old software. Morning linguistic setup. Prime your brain for the day by vocalizing your intended identity before engaging with the outside world. The pause and pivot. The moment you catch yourself using a limiting phrase, physically pause and immediately replace it with an empowering one. This break is the key to rewiring neural circuits. Evening linguistic audit. Review your linguistic choices daily to cultivate awareness, celebrate progress, and identify areas for improvement. Mental anchoring. Use daily triggers, like seeing your reflection, to anchor empowering identity statements into your consciousness. Linguistic diet. Your vocabulary is influenced by your environment. Proactively curate your conversations and media intake to support the version of yourself you are building. Persistence over perfection. Transformation isn't about being perfect, it's about the consistent practice of. Chapter 12, Speaking Through Difficult Seasons. Adversity is not an anomaly in the human experience, it is a fundamental part of the curriculum. There will be seasons in your life where the external conditions are simply harsh, where the economy is unstable, a relationship is fracturing, a health challenge arises, or a dream you worked for falls apart. In these moments, the temptation to use the language of defeat is overwhelming. The brain, seeking safety, naturally wants to describe the difficulty as an absolute, permanent, and personal failure. But it is precisely in these difficult seasons that your language matters most. Your words in the valley determine whether that season becomes a graveyard of your dreams or a furnace for your growth. When you are in the thick of a crisis, it is common to hear people speak as if the situation is their entire reality. They say, "My life is over," or "I am destroyed." While the emotional intensity of these statements is understandable, they are linguistically catastrophic. They equate the event with the entirety of your existence. You must learn to separate the situation from your identity. A more precise, stabilizing language would be, "This event is currently affecting my life, but it is not the totality of my life." This nuance may seem small, but it prevents you from being completely swallowed by the challenge. Instead of the language of total defeat, adopt the language of endurance. Resilience is often articulated through phrases that acknowledge the hardship while maintaining a focus on movement. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" which traps you in the cycle of victimhood, ask, "What is this season requiring of me, and how can I meet that requirement?" This is the language of the survivor. It acknowledges the burden but immediately shifts the focus to the necessary action. It transforms the crisis from a wall into a mountain that must be climbed, and you are the climber. There is also a profound power in the language of temporal framing. When you are suffering, the brain struggles to conceive of a future where things are different. It feels as though the current pain will last forever. You can counter this by using time-delimited language. Instead of saying, "I am always going to feel this way," try, "I am feeling this way right now, and I am learning how to navigate this current moment." By adding, "right now," you break the illusion of permanence. You remind your nervous system that your current state is a snapshot, not the full feature film. This creates the breathing room you need to stay calm and rational. Furthermore, during hard times, we often fall into the trap of self-cruelty, speaking to ourselves with a harshness we would never dream of using with a friend in crisis. If you notice yourself thinking, "I shouldn't be struggling this much, I should be stronger," stop immediately. Replace that with the language of self-compassion. "This is a difficult season, and it makes sense that I am finding it taxing. I am doing the best I can with the tools I currently have." Self-compassion is not self-indulgence, it is a tactical necessity. When you treat yourself with the language of a supportive partner, you lower your cortisol levels, improve your cognitive clarity, and regain the energy needed to fight your way through the season. It is also important to guard your speech when speaking to others about your struggles. There is a fine line between seeking necessary support and venting into the void. When you vent, you are often just re-traumatizing yourself by repeating the details of the pain. When you seek support, you are sharing the challenge with the goal of gaining perspective or assistance. If you find yourself telling the same tragedy story over and over to different people, you are physically reinforcing the neural pathways of that trauma. Start sharing the story of the solution. Say, "This is what I am navigating, and this is what I am learning." This shifts your narrative from one of wounding to one of navigation. Finally, remember that the words you speak during your darkest hours are the seeds of your recovery. Use the language of hope, even when the evidence for hope seems thin. Say, "I am confident that I will come through this better than I started," or "I am looking for the lessons hidden in this friction." Your brain will listen to these commands, even if your heart is heavy. You are literally speaking your way out of the darkness. By refusing to adopt the vocabulary of despair, you ensure that you remain a person who can move, grow, and eventually thrive once the season passes. You are the navigator of your own life, and the voice you choose to use in the storm is the most important tool in your kit. Chapter Summary. Adversity as curriculum. Difficult seasons are inevitable. Your words determine whether these seasons define your life or refine your character. Separating situation from identity. Never equate a temporary crisis with your entire existence. Use language that defines the event as external to your core identity. The language of endurance. Shift from, "Why is this happening?" victimhood, to, "What does this require of me?" Survivor/climber. Temporal framing. Use, "right now," to add perspective to your pain, breaking the illusion that your current state is permanent. Tactical self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same linguistic kindness you would offer a friend in crisis. This lowers physiological stress and increases your ability to problem solve. Support versus venting. Avoid the repetitive retelling of tragedy stories. Seek support by focusing your language on what you are learning and navigating, not just what you are suffering. Speaking through the storm. Your words are the seeds of your recovery. Maintain a language of hope and learning to ensure your mind remains oriented. Chapter 13. Becoming someone others feel inspired by. Influence is rarely about the volume of your voice or the grandiosity of your titles, it is about the frequency and resonance of your language. When you encounter someone who seems to command respect, trust, and inspiration naturally, you are usually observing someone who has mastered the art of elevated communication. This is not a performative skill meant to manipulate others, it is an internal alignment that manifests outwardly. When you speak with authenticity, clarity, and purpose, you provide a mirror that allows others to see their own potential more clearly. You become a catalyst for their growth simply by existing in their field of vision. The cornerstone of inspirational communication is presence-centered language. Most people, in their day-to-day interactions, are physically present but mentally distracted, thinking about their next sentence or their next task. When you speak to someone with total, undivided attention, validating their perspective before introducing your own, you shift the nature of the interaction. Using phrases like, "I hear exactly what you're saying, and it makes me think about," signals that you are not just waiting for your turn to speak, you are actively engaging with their reality. This level of respect is rare, and it is profoundly magnetic. People are starving for the feeling of being truly seen, and they will naturally gravitate toward those who offer that experience. Beyond presence, the most inspiring communicators use the language of empowerment. They do not just provide information, they provide perspective. When someone comes to them with a problem, they do not just offer a fix, they offer an observation that helps the person discover the answer for themselves. They might say, "You've handled complex situations before. What does your intuition tell you is the right move here?" By mirroring the other person's capability back to them through your questions, you help them own their power. You are not a leader who creates followers, you are a leader who creates leaders. Another vital element is radical authenticity. In a world of curated personas, people are increasingly cynical about anything that feels polished or salesy. The most inspiring people are those who are willing to admit their own humanity. They don't speak as if they are infallible. When they speak, they use the language of vulnerability, which sounds like, "I've navigated a similar challenge, and here is how I stumbled and what I learned." When you share your own path, including the friction and the setbacks, you give others permission to be human, too. This builds a foundation of trust that no amount of professional polish can ever replicate. Furthermore, inspiring people are architects of possibility in their conversations. When a group is focused on why something cannot be done, the inspiring leader shifts the focus to what could be done. They do this by avoiding the "but" trap. Instead of saying, "That's a good idea, but it's too expensive," they say, "That's a good idea, and the challenge we need to solve is the budget." By replacing "but" with "and," they keep the creative energy moving forward. They are the people who keep the room bright, even when others are looking for the exit. Inspiration also comes from the language of vision. You don't have to be a CEO to have a vision. A vision is simply a clear, compelling description of a better future. When you speak about your goals, your family, your community, or your career with vivid imagery and emotional weight, you invite others to participate in that vision. You are not just talking, you are painting a picture. You are describing a world that doesn't exist yet, and because you speak of it with such conviction, others begin to see it, too. Your language provides the blueprint for a reality they hadn't yet imagined. Finally, consider the power of intentional affirmation. You have the ability to change someone's day, or perhaps their life, with a single, well-placed sentence. Do not wait for a special occasion to express your appreciation or acknowledge someone's unique talent. When you see someone demonstrating a quality you admire, name it. I noticed how calmly you handled that situation. That is a rare skill. When you make it a habit to point out the brilliance in others, you become a person who makes the world feel like a better place to be. You become a source of light. Becoming someone who inspires others is a natural byproduct of your own internal work. As you become more conscious of your own language, more compassionate toward your own struggles, and more committed to your own growth, you will naturally begin to extend that same grace and vision to everyone you encounter. You will stop needing to try to inspire. You will find that your very presence, and the language you carry, becomes an inspiration in itself. Chapter Summary. Present-centered communication. Inspiration is rooted in undivided attention. Validating others' perspectives makes them feel seen, which is a rare and magnetic trait. Creating leaders. Use empowerment language by reflecting others' capability back to them through inquiry rather than offering immediate, directive fixes. Radical authenticity. Use the language of vulnerability to share your own stumbles. This breaks down walls and builds authentic trust that polish cannot replace. The and pivot. Replace the limiting, but with and to maintain momentum and creative energy in problem-solving discussions. Visionary language. Paint vivid pictures of the future. When you speak of possibilities with conviction, you invite others to share in that vision. Intentional affirmation. Make it a habit to explicitly name the brilliance you see in others. This positions you as a source of light and encouragement. Natural influence. Inspiration is a byproduct of your own internal transformation. As you embody these traits, your presence alone becomes a catalyst for others. Chapter 14. Creating a new life one conversation at a time. We often hold a grand, cinematic view of transformation. We wait for a light bulb moment, a life-altering crisis, or a sudden stroke of inspiration that will sweep us up and deposit us into a completely new reality. We treat our lives like a movie script, hoping for a dramatic montage that changes everything in 3 minutes of music. But the reality is far more subtle and, ultimately, much more powerful. You do not build a new life in a single, heroic act. You build it in the quiet, mundane, and seemingly insignificant conversations that you have throughout the day. Your life is a cumulative effect of the choices you make in the space between stimulus and response. Every time you speak, you are casting a vote for who you are and who you are becoming. A single conversation might seem like a drop in the ocean, but when you look at the thousands of interactions you have each month, you realize you are looking at the tide that moves the ship of your life. When you start to be intentional about your speech, you will notice that life doesn't change all at once. Instead, it begins to soften around the edges. Relationships that were once characterized by friction begin to show glimmers of grace. Professional challenges that once felt like dead ends start to reveal hidden pathways. Your own internal climate, once volatile and prone to storms of self-doubt, begins to stabilize into a clear, steady state of self-trust. This is the accumulation effect. Just as compound interest builds wealth over time, small, consistent improvements in your language build a masterpiece of a life. It is easy to get impatient. When we start this work, we want the results to manifest in the external world immediately. We want the new job, the restored relationship, or the profound sense of peace to show up by the end of the week. But if you focus too heavily on the when, you miss the what. The true joy is not found in the final result, it is found in the deepening of your own consciousness. The journey of refining your speech is actually the journey of refining your own soul. You are becoming a person of precision, kindness, depth, and clarity, and those qualities are their own reward. As you move forward, keep a watchful eye on your own default language. We all have linguistic habits that serve as our safety settings. When we are tired, rushed, or stressed, we will still occasionally slip back into the old, limiting ways of speaking. Do not let this discourage you. The fact that you noticed the slip is proof that you have already changed. The version of you from a month ago wouldn't have even realized the slip was happening. You are developing a meta-awareness that is the hallmark of high-level emotional intelligence. Consider the ripple effect of your language. When you speak with intentionality, you change the way you see yourself. When you change how you see yourself, you change how you act. When you change how you act, you change the results you produce in the world. And when you change your results, you change the environment for everyone around you. You are not just transforming your own life, you are acting as an agent of change for your family, your workplace, and your community. You are showing them, through your own living example, that it is possible to live with agency, grace, and deliberate focus. One of the most profound ways to continue this momentum is to practice the language of legacy. Start asking yourself, if I were to leave my words behind as a record of who I was, would I be proud of the impact they had? This keeps you focused on the long-term arc of your life. It ensures that you aren't just trying to win today's argument or express today's frustration, you are trying to embody a way of being that stands the test of time. It elevates your stakes and helps you maintain your focus when the day-to-day work feels tedious. You are the author of your internal script, and you have been given the pen. Every word you choose is a stroke of ink on the page of your future. Do not settle for a draft that is written in the language of limitation, fear, or victimhood. Write a story of growth, connection, and profound possibility. You are currently in the middle of a chapter that only you can write. Be deliberate. Be bold. Be kind. With every conversation, with every thought, and with every sentence, you are creating a new life, one single, beautiful conversation at a time. Chapter Summary. The accumulation effect, transformation is not a cinematic event, it is the compound result of thousands of small, intentional linguistic choices. The softening of reality, intentional language doesn't fix everything instantly, but it changes the texture of your life, making challenges easier to navigate and relationships smoother. Refining the soul, the ultimate goal of this work is not just external success, but the evolution of your own character and consciousness. Meta-awareness, noticing when you slip into old habits is a sign of progress, not failure, it shows your level of conscious awareness is growing. The ripple effect, your changed language alters your actions, which changes your results, which in turn elevates the quality of life for those around you. The language of legacy. Ask if your words align with the legacy you want to leave behind. This keeps your focus on your long-term character rather than short-term relief. Authoring your life, you are the author of your reality, use your words to craft a story of growth. Chapter 15, Your New Voice, Your New Future. We have arrived at the threshold of a new way of being. Over the last 14 chapters, we have explored the invisible architecture of your reality, the way your internal and external language serves as the blueprint for your identity, your relationships, your professional success, and your emotional stability. We have moved from the silent, reactive patterns of the past to the intentional, creative design of your future. You have learned that your words are not just descriptions, they are the primary tools of your creation. As you close this book, I want you to understand that this is not a finish line. This is the beginning of a lifelong philosophy. The most successful and fulfilled individuals are those who never stop refining the way they interface with the world through their language. They never stop asking, is this word true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Does it align with the vision of the life I am building? You now possess a skill that most people spend a lifetime searching for without realizing it has been sitting on the tip of their tongue. You have the ability to catch your own thoughts before they solidify into beliefs. You have the ability to reframe your challenges into opportunities for growth. You have the ability to influence your environment by speaking with the clarity and purpose of someone who knows exactly who they are and where they are going. As you step back into your daily life, you may face moments where the old habits try to return. You will encounter days where the pressure is high, where the news is disheartening, or where your own inner critic is particularly loud. In those moments, do not be surprised, and do not be discouraged. Simply return to the center. Remember that your new voice is a muscle, it requires consistent exercise to remain strong. The more you use it, the more natural it will become. Eventually, the language of possibility, gratitude, and agency will be your native tongue. You won't have to try to be intentional, you will simply be a person who speaks from a place of depth. Consider the ripple effect of your future. Every word you speak from this day forward will set a new standard for your family, your peers, and the legacy you leave behind. When you speak with the vocabulary of an empowered life, you give others permission to do the same. You become a beacon of clarity in a world that is often confused, and a source of calm in a world that is often chaotic. Your new voice is a gift, not just to yourself, but to every life you touch. I invite you to keep this philosophy close. Let it be the filter through which you process the events of your life. When you encounter a setback, let your first thought be, what language will I use to describe this to myself? When you encounter a relationship conflict, let your first thought be, what language can I use to invite connection? When you face a new, intimidating goal, let your first thought be, what language will I use to embody the person who achieves this? You are no longer the person who started this book. You have performed a radical audit of your internal operating system. You have pruned the weeds of limitation and planted the seeds of your future. You are now the architect of your own destiny, and your speech is the medium through which you build. The life you desire is not something that happens to you by accident. It is something you speak into existence, one sentence at a time. It is a life built on the foundations of truth, intentionality, and unshakable belief in your own potential. As you move forward, do so with confidence. Your voice is ready, your path is clear, and your future is waiting for you to name it. Speak it into being. Live it into existence. Your new life starts with the very next word you choose. Chapter Summary. The lifelong philosophy, intentional speech is not a one-time project, it is a permanent practice of refining how you interface with reality. The skill of creation. You now have the power to catch limiting thoughts, reframe challenges, and project the identity you want to embody. Strengthening the muscle, consistency is key. As you continue to practice, your new, intentional language will replace old habits until it becomes your natural way of being. The ripple effect, your changed voice impacts everyone you encounter, making you an agent of clarity and grace in your community. The threefold filter, continually test your words. Are they true? Are they necessary? Do they align with the vision of the life you are building? The architect of destiny, you have been given the pen to write your life story. Use your words to craft